everybody, I'm T.S. Ferguson. I'm an associate editor with Harlequin Teen. I'm excited to be here at New York Comic Con 2013 interviewing one of my authors, Kady Cross, the author of the Steampunk Chronicles, including The Girl with the Steel Corset, The Girl in the Clockwork Collar, and The Girl with the Iron Touch. Hi, Kate.
Hi.
So tell us a little more about steampunk and how you came up with the idea for the Steampunk Chronicles.
Well, when I came up with the idea for the book, I wasn't even sure what steampunk was. I knew what I wanted to write, but I didn't know there was actually a name for it. And I pitched it to my editor, who was not you, sadly, that I wanted to do a sort of an X-Men with a League of Extraordinary Gentlemen kind of feel to it, only maybe not quite so dark. And it was my editor at the time who said, "Oh, steampunk, cool." And I was kind of like, well, what is a steampunk? And then I started doing some research into it some more and found out that yes, that was exactly what I wanted to write. And it was something that I had loved for years and never even knew there was a name for it. So it was just this wonderful organic fit for the book.
Okay. Well, the main character, Finley, is sort of a steampunk descendant of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Can you talk about some of her struggles and her journey throughout the series?
Sure. Finley is this teenage girl who was born with these extraordinary abilities because of experiments that her father did before she was born. And she has two distinct sides to her personality. One is sort of this sweet girl, and the other one is this wild child. And she would love desperately to get rid of her wild child side, but I liked the idea more of trying to combine the two and have her find herself. You know, that whole coming of age thing. So it was very interesting to write her because on one hand she is this very typical good Victorian girl, but then on the other hand she has these urges and these instincts that were really more masculine for that age. And so I love the fact about being able to write her in that time period, but also just make her completely dangerous and able to take care of herself and deal with any trouble that came her way.
Great. And you mentioned this is kind of a Victorian era X-Men. Can you talk about some of the powers and abilities you gave your characters?
Well, sure. I mean, I love superheroes. Here we are at Comic-Con, and I'm running, my head, you have to excuse me if my head keeps going because I'm looking at all the costumes. I'm such a geek, and it's fabulous, and I love superheroes. And when I was 3, I wanted to be Jamie Summers or Wonder Woman. I wasn't choosy. And so I've always loved that idea of that extraordinary person. And I think that's something, especially with teenagers, that we can all relate to, because you never want to be more different than you do when you're a teenager. And who didn't want to be Carrie? I'm sorry, but every girl I know wanted to be Carrie at one point. So it was just a theme that came very naturally to me, and I knew I wanted to write these kids who were different in a time period when it would be very, very awful to be different. But also at the same time, Darwin's theory of evolution was a big deal in the Victorian era, and it was just coming out, and it caused a lot of controversy. So it just seemed like the perfect Victorian superhero, especially mutated superhero, just seemed like the perfect mix for the time period. And then to add the steampunk to it, it was just incredible. So I sort of went with the archetypal idea, because, in a lot of groups at work, like with Buffy and the Scooby Gang and all that, you have your archetypes. So that's sort of how I approach the book. And so I have Griffin King, who's very much my Batman character, very smart and wealthy. And then I have Emily, who is sort of like my Kaylee from Firefly. She's my tech. And then we have the tank, who is Sam, and Jasper the gunslinger. So, he's the the ranged kind of weaponry. And then we have Finley, who's the scrapper, and they all just fit very nicely together.
Excellent. Sounds like you play video games too.
I do, yeah. And I'm always the tank or the scrapper.
Excellent. Well, I want to talk about the romance too, because
Sure.
These books keep getting sexier. What are the struggles that you have writing romance in such an action-packed book, and what are the struggles that you have writing romance for a teen audience?
Well, I started out as a romance writer, so it comes fairly easily, but when I started these books, it wasn't with the idea of making them romance per se. I knew I wanted to have relationships in them, but I didn't want to jump into it. And I knew it was going to be more than one book, so I didn't necessarily want it to all happen overnight, which was funny because I did get a lot of letters from people that were very upset that Finley and Griffin did not get together in book one. But then I got almost as many letters from people who were glad that they hadn't. So I've built their relationship over the books, and I think people will be, especially with book 3, will be really happy with how things have gone. And but what's been hard for me is sometimes I do have to rein it in a little bit, because I still remember what it was like to be 15, 16 years old, and all those wonderful things that happened. But you don't want to get too graphic, and I don't want it to seem gratuitous or tossed in. So I try to make sure that it's the genuine feeling that's there more than the hormones, I guess, for lack of a better term. And I want the audience to really believe that by the time something happens between them, that they are actually in love with one another.
All right, so book 3, The Girl with the Iron Touch, just published in June. And I want to ask Kate, tell us what's happening in this book.
Oh, wow. Okay. I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but for people who have been reading the series, the Machinist, their nemesis, is back. There's some really creepy automatons, sentient automatons that have gone off on their own. There's a new interesting character being introduced. Jack Dandy is back and playing a big part in the book. Wildcat from New York is going to show up, and she's going to be playing a part in the plot as well. And it's this kind of gritty, mysterious, dangerous plot involving the return of the Machinist, an underground lair, and some killer machines.
And I love that this book focuses on Emily. She's one of my favorite characters.
I love Emily, and it was so lovely to be able to get into her head and present her as a more fleshed out character. That said, I also got to get into Sam's head a bit more, and Sam, for all his being a big chest thumper, is one of my all-time favorite characters. So I loved writing him as that almost the heroic male. That he got to
Yeah, he stopped
try to
brooding
save her,
and being, or continued brooding, but
yeah,
got to be the hero too.
Yeah.
All right, so what's next for this series then?
Well, we have 2 short stories. Well, one short story, Jack Dandy's story, has come out, and there's going to be a short story with Jasper and Wildcat come out next month.
Yep.
You know that.
November.
and then the 4th and final book in the series is going to be out next summer, and it's. Wow, there's a lot going on. There's Jack and a side plot with a character that's introduced in The Girl with the Iron Touch, and you find out a lot more about Jack's past. And there's the Piccadilly Circus is back. They were in the first book, and also the Machinist is finally going to be resolved. Griffin's in danger. Finley's risking all to save him. The mystery of Finley's father is going to be solved, and we're finally going to find out what really happened to Lord Felix August Rains.
Excellent. And this is the last book, so you're really
it's
winding
the last
down.
book, so yeah,
concluding
so
in a big way. Yeah,
I think it's going to be a very fast-paced, action-packed, but I hope it'll have a lot of the emotion in it as well too.
And you want to tell the audience what the title of that book is?
The title of that book is The Girl with the Wind-Up Heart.
Excellent. Well, and that's where we're going to leave you guys.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.